in the first place, cell and gene, the intent is to be curative. So because of that, they're transformational. You want to cure the patient. I mean, that's the premise. And, if I want to describe it in, at a very high level. So instead of incremental improvements, you really want the cure. So because of that, they tend to be a revolution in itself. However, the healthcare systems and the logistics are complex. So there are a number of steps or obstacles to be able to deliver the therapies to patients anywhere they are and whoever need them.
It's bigger than biotech.
Thank you so much for being on with us, Dr. Garnica. It's a pleasure having you on It's Bigger Than Biotech.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. And I'm so excited to be here. And congrats on the podcast. I think this is awesome.
Perfect. I've always wanted to have someone from cell and gene therapy on the podcast, and I'm really excited for this episode. So let's get right into it. The first thing I want to ask you is that you've worked across global biopharma for more than 2 decades. Could you share your journey from getting your PhD in chemistry from Imperial College London and to getting your MBA at London Business School and going through Harvard's strategic negotiation program to become the global payer lead at Amgen? What drew you into market access and health economics rather than going into a purely scientific role like your PhD in chemistry?
So I love science. I have to say, I love it. I read about science all the time, from astrophysics to biology to, anything actually. And so I was good at it. And I was very young when I did my PhD in Imperial College in London. But then I realized, even during my PhD, lab work probably is not for me. It can be very lonely, and I am probably very social, and I'm I like to talk to people and be in a social environment. So that was a disadvantage of the lab work, or at least at that time, and at least in physical chemistry, which is what I was doing. So I did, however, I worked after graduation, I worked in the lab for a number of years, like 5 years, in physical chemistry, very dry if you want. And then I wanted a change in my career, so I decided to do an MBA. And the MBA for 2 reasons. First, because MBA at that point in time was kind of a change in careers. And number 2, because I was also very interested. I was interested in economics and business, kind of bridge between science and business, or science and economics, if you want. So I did the MBA. So yes, my career kind of changed. I still stayed in the oil and gas industry. That was my job, in the oil and gas. And then there was this opportunity with Bristol Myers Squibb. I was interested in the biological sciences somehow, mainly because at that point in time, and I'm talking at the end of the 90s, at the beginning of the 2000s, there was a lot of innovation in the biological sciences. It was the launch of the biologics. And there was growth in the biopharma industry. It was a new thing. The pharma industry up until that point was mainly chemicals. It was a chemistry based, but then the biologics came to play, and I was interested. I was very interested, and even if I did not have the training, well, I had the science training, and I had somehow the business training, in the sense of the MBA. So, long story short, I got the job, and that job was actually in market access. It was market access. It was a very new area in the pharma industry. Market access was about how can we communicate the value of what we do to governments who will be able to pay for these new medications that are costly and complex. And it was a bit of a revolution. So that was a new area. And I have to say, I was in market access or a similar role in the oil and gas industry. I mean, this is interesting. The oil and gas industry also has, they don't call it market access, but it is market access, and it's access to exploration areas. So I was working on that, how to access exploration areas. And so, you come with a value proposition, if you want, long-term investments, uncertainty, because you don't know if you're going to find oil. So you apply kind of the same skills to the pharma industry. Again, you have a kind of promise. It's science, it's innovation, it's advancement, but you need a partnership with the governments. So that was market access, and it was a perfect blend of science and business. It was actually the bridge between science and business. You need to understand the science well, and you need to speak the business language.
There's a lot of things to unpack in there. Definitely from the first part of going into lab and figuring out it was not for you because of the loneliness. In your experience, looking back, were there any particular experiences or mentors that steered you towards value and access and later maybe cell and gene therapy?
I can say that I always had this love for science, but also for geography and economics and business. So I just blended, what I enjoyed, in the sense of, if there was some intention around, was doing what I enjoyed. It's not that I was bored doing it. I loved it. I enjoyed doing it. No, I was, I believe, 25 when I got my PhD. At that point, you don't know, you don't know how, how your career is going to unfold. Particularly, in the last 30 years, where technology has advanced and science has advanced so much. So things change. And so I adapted, if you want. But I don't think I planned for that. I don't think I said, okay, I want to do market access. I didn't know. I just was trying to find a way where I could apply my skills, my education, and what I actually enjoyed doing. You also ask about if there was someone, I have to say, one person that actually had a huge influence on me was my PhD supervisor, Dr. Michael Spiro at Imperial College in London, because he was such a great mentor, tutor, and scientific figure for me. Rigorous, but also very human. And he was a nice human being in the first place, and then a scientist, and so that inspired me. Of you lead in the most possible human way. you understand people as people, not as resources. So I think his teachings and his example are still with me.
Mm.
So if there's someone that I have to thank, is him,
I
Professor Spiro at Imperial College.
definitely. And I actually that brings me to two questions. The first one being, what is an important lesson that he departed onto you that has stuck with you throughout your career? And my second question to you is, who is a mentor versus who is an advisor? Because those two are very distinct in a way that I have learned from my own experience.
So probably the lessons is the rigor, in the data. You have to detach always from the data. You want it to be one way, but you really have to detach. And this is so difficult because, we all have biases and we always want to, we want confirming data, to again confirm what we think, but it's not always the case. So his rigor in the analysis, in the collection and analysis of data, and also in how to design experiments. This is the scientific method. It's how you collect data and how you interpret it and what can you say about it. Y- so that I learned. So an advisor probably is at a distance, I think, in the sense of the advisor advises, uh, which means that provides guidance. I think the mentor has a personal investment as well in in the mentee. So there's more of an involvement. Both the mentor and the mentee have a commitment to grow because they both grow. The mentee will advance. The mentor will leave a legacy. So there's more of a personal mission and commitment in that relationship. I mean, nothing wrong with the advisor, all right? Absolutely. But and this is my own experience. I am a mentor of actually many USC students that, I've had the fortune of, knowing through the years. And not only USC students, but colleagues and friends, and to be a mentor is an honor, is a privilege, and so you have a commitment, and I usually take it for life. It's not only a mentor for 3 months. It's someone, both a mentor and a mentee is something you build with time. There's also, there are many companies who with a method to try to match mentees and mentors. I've been in a couple of companies doing that, which is great. Also, actually, my business school, London Business School, also has that program of mentors versus mentees. So they match, and it can go well, or it may not go well. Depends on the commitment. I think it's a commitment. It's a commitment of both sides.
Okay. So talking of the companies you've worked at, at Amgen, you were working as the global player lead in oncology. So and especially focusing on early stage assets. In that situation, what were some of the most important lessons you learned about engaging with payers and regulators across different regions?
So that role, I loved it. I enjoyed it so much because early assets, well, you have to imagine the future. An early asset usually is in phase one or about to go to phase one. So it's still a promise. You don't know if it's going to work, if it's going to be. However, you imagine the value. You think, well, this could be the value proposition from now to 5 years or 10 years down the line. So it's a way to see the future, to imagine the future. So what is it that what are the skills? Well, you really have to understand the science. So I work with, the people in clinical development and in also, in translational medicine, trying to understand, okay, so what are we trying to do here? On the other hand, I was trying to be a messenger of what is it that the market needs? What are the needs? What are the future needs? Or, there's a potential competitor doing about the same, and they may be doing it better or faster or cheaper. So what's our value proposition then if there's a competitor in a better way? So again, that was a window to the future. And it was very exciting because you work on hypotheses and you work on how the market dynamics will play out in the future. And then you go with the clinical development, you go along and then refine, and you continue to refine. So that's one of the most exciting and difficult, very difficult role. So yeah, and your question was, how do you work with payers? Well, that was also a great experience, and I'm so happy that payers are open to that, because they want to know what's in the future, what's the pipeline. That's the word we have. What's the pipeline? What are you working on? And so we brought the plans, the clinical development, the future value proposition. This is what we're doing, and what do you think? You ask the payers, what do you think from now to 5 years? What do you see a value here? Would you would you make would you suggest some changes in what we do? So it was a very dynamic interaction between us and the payers. I mean, and as I said, I'm so happy that the payers in Germany, in France, in Canada, in the UK, have very structured processes to talk to companies and talk about the pipeline and provide feedback. And also in the US, probably less structured, so you have to put some structure around. As a company, you have to make it happen. But then also, the idea is you ask. I mean, I'm doing this development. What do you think? What do you think about this potential new mechanism of action, treating the patients this way, um, with these expected outcomes? What do you think? So that was, again, very challenging because I repeat myself. You look into the future. You have to predict the future. I work very closely with my regulatory affairs colleagues. So they talk to regulators, I talk to payers, and then we try to bring together the feedback from regulators and payers and then decide on what the clinical development plan was going to be and what is the value proposition. And so we adjusted. according to the feedback. So, as I said, I enjoy that role very much.
I see. Yeah, and it sounds like a very interesting role, especially on the payer side of things. But for more clarity of our listeners, who are these payers and what is their role within the system?
Great question. So the payers are those who pay for the medications. Put it very simply, that's the way it is. Now, those are different according to the country. In each country, there's a different layout on how the healthcare system works. If I summarize it at a very high level, in the US, we have the insurance companies. So we usually call them the commercial payers. For most of the population under 65. And we have the government payers, so Medicare for the over 65. And for those under the poverty line, we have Medicaid. And for veterans, we have Veteran Affairs. So, that's in summary what we can say about the US. In the rest of the developed world, usually it's taxpayer funded. So, if I say it in very simple terms, is a government. It's a government agency deciding if to pay and how much to pay for medications. And in low and middle income countries, it's usually a mix of some government payers and commercial payers. It's a mix, and it depends on the country.
Okay, that brings a lot of clarity to the conversation. Would you say your MBA and executive training in negotiating and strategic thinking helped you within these roles? And realistically, would it be like if someone was trying to get into the same role you did at Amgen, would it be worth it for them to go about the same route you did?
Well, absolutely the academic credentials help greatly. The scientific background also helps greatly. In market access or value and access, which, some companies call it value and access, there's also loads of economists. So you get there either through the scientific background or economics background. So that actually, enriches the conversation because people have different points of view on how to tackle the issue. At the very end, what you need to understand is what you have to be able to communicate the value of the innovation, and you have to be able to negotiate with the payer, whoever the payer is. So the ability to communicate is essential.
Okay.
In writing, verbally, you also have to have some social skills. You don't want to be not nice.
Right.
When you're in front of, they're your partners. So you have to have a relationship with your partners. You have to be credible. That's my point. You have to be credible. You have to be factual. You have to be open. Because you're negotiating, and as I mentioned, you have to be skillful in how to communicate the value of the science, the value of the intervention, what you bring into the table, how you're going to improve how the patients are treated in the future versus the way the patients are treated today. So I think probably, let me say, 3 blocks you have to have. You have to have the scientific/economics knowledge. You have to have the ability to communicate well. And you also have to have the ability to negotiate. You usually acquire all those building blocks in academia. You know, you bring all that, you bring your academic credentials, and then you're exposed, and then you get the experience.
Okay.
And that's what I did essentially.
Wow. So first off, you mentioned two pathways as the science route into a global pair lead, and there's an economics route. So could you give an example of both the routes? Like, what would a economics path look like versus what would a scientific path look like?
The advantage of the scientific pathway is that you understand again the science, you understand the clinical trial, you understand the or the mechanism of action or the way the patients are treated. And, you know, you may have PharmDs in this position, PhDs in science, you have MDs doing the position. You know, when I say the position is value and access or market access, or you may also have economics, you know, people with PhD in economics, in which, and why? Well, because you're talking about a new intervention that will have an impact, an economic impact in the healthcare system. And so you also want to be able to articulate the value of that for the healthcare system. And you're talking about, you know, the efficient use of limited resources in the healthcare system. And so that's another way to approach it is, you know, how are you going to use the resources effectively? I also have to say, you know, it's not one or the other approach. I mean, we have to blend it. And so people with a scientific background learn the economics language. People with the economics background learn the scientific language. And so you bring a consolidated one. That's the beauty of market access, I think. And that you bring, you know, both together, and it's intellectually challenging, and and you learn a lot and you expand your horizons a lot.
I see. And now, more based off of curiosity, you mentioned that negotiating is a big block of the role. So, are there any important skills you've learned or important teachings you learned from negotiating that we can use on a day-to-day basis?
The communication skills are so important. I also believe, you know, this is probably the basics of negotiation. You want to get to a certain goal, and you know you understand what you may sacrifice, and but what is your minimum ask. So and then you know you do it naturally. I think we all do it naturally, and some people are better than others, but I think we do that on a day to day, all the time. We negotiate with the people around us all the time, you know, and the important thing is that once again that you communicate clearly what your goals and objectives are, and that you reach at least your minimum stated goals.
I'd say. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of implicit lessons within the teachings you just gave. Firstly, start with a goal in mind. Sometimes people don't. It's not very obvious when you start negotiating that there is no goal, or maybe you just want to win at all costs. That sometimes maybe you don't want to sacrifice anything, and maybe negotiating doesn't work that way. Or are there situations where you just can get everything you want? Has that been true in your experience?
Let me put it this way: the winner takes it all is probably not the best strategy all the time. You know, you don't want to again, you know, it depends on the circumstance. But you know, you also don't want to destroy the other side. You know, you usually you want a long-term partnership. You know, when we're talking about, you know, the biopharma industry and the payers, you really want a long-term partnership. It's not a one-off game. you will see these partners always. So the winner takes it all approach may work one time, but what happens when you come back in 6 months, for a different negotiation? It won't help you. So I think, it's not my style.
I
Let me
see.
put it that way. It's
Okay.
not my style. I think, what would be better for both sides in a rational, positive way,
Mm.
uh, so that we can advance. This is about patience. This is about people, payers, and, the companies are they have the same mission, if you want.
Right.
So we have to win on behalf of the patient, all of us. So, at the very end, we are trying to, we have a higher goal,
Right.
which is to serve the patients. Correct? This is the reason why you're in this field. It's bigger than biotech. You're even the title of your podcast says it. Correct? Describes this is bigger than the industry itself. This is a real purpose.
Definitely.
And because of that, I think having that negotiation mindset, you think of the ultimate goal, which is to help patients wherever they are.
I see. Yeah, so win-win mindset is very important. And thank you for the shout out in your answer. I really appreciate it. So now switching gears onto CAR-T Global. So your company that operates within consulting for gene therapies and CAR-T focuses on commercializing cell and gene therapy assets. So, in your experience, why don't traditional pharmaceutical launch plans translate to products like cell and gene therapy?
In the first place, cell and gene, the intent is to be curative.
Mm.
Is so because of that, they're transformational. You want to cure the patient. That's the premise. And, if I want to describe it in, at a very high level. So instead of incremental improvements, you really want the cure. So because of that, they tend to be a revolution in itself, but they are complex.
Mm.
They're very complex. The science has delivered, I think. We've seen so many examples where, the science has delivered. However, the healthcare systems and the logistics are complex. So there are a number of steps or obstacles to be able to deliver therapies to patients anywhere they are and whoever they need them. And we're still very far from that point. What I'm trying to say is that the science is way ahead of what the systems have been able to deliver. And this is everywhere in the world. This is in the US and in the developed high income markets. And it's even more critical, or the gap is even greater in low and middle income countries. So I think we need to rethink and be absolutely open on different options on how to close that gap between the science, which is delivering, and the healthcare systems that have been. And when I say healthcare systems, it's not only the way the countries are structured, but also even how biopharma operates in the ecosystem. I think all actors have to come together to close the gaps. we're still far from that.
Right.
This is what we're trying to do with CARTI Global. CARTI Global, we started as consultants, and well, because we're six partners all around the world, and we have the experience of working in cell and gene therapy. And we started as consultants, but we quickly realized that, hey, we need to do more. And it was one of our clients who said, do you want to become partners? Do you want to help us actually deliver this cell therapy in a number of geographies? And so that's why we rebranded ourselves. We used to be called CARTI Global Consultants. Now we're CARTI Global. The idea is that we actually do it ourselves. We bring the cell and gene therapies. For now, to low and middle income countries, we will be expanding to other markets. High income markets. But for now, the need is huge in low and middle income countries. So that's why we started in
Definitely.
low and middle.
Yes, especially looking at the price tag for cell and gene therapy is very high, and it's very questionable whether lower middle income countries can afford this sort of therapy. So it's definitely a big market need that CAR-T Global is filling in. But just for more understanding, how does CAR-T Global do this specifically? How does this model work in practice, and what problems does it solve for payers as well as smaller cell and gene therapy developers?
Sure. So let me make these comments. With the price tags of cell and gene as we've seen, the answer is a resounding no. Low and middle income countries will not be able to afford the price of those cell and gene therapies. So you have to think differently. The traditional model, which is, you know, um, bringing those cell and gene therapies from the international companies to low and middle income countries will not work because those prices are not affordable. So you have to do it in a different way. So the way we do it is that, we've partnered with two organizations in the US. They're called Caring Cross, which is a nonprofit organization. It's a nonprofit R&D. And we've also partnered with Vector Biomed, which is a vector manufacturer, with a social investment mission. So we partnered with them to bring their technologies to low and middle income countries and make it affordable. So the the for us, we make sure we price it differently. We will not price it according to the usual methodologies of pricing, which is value-based pricing, because otherwise, it's not going to be affordable. This is what the experience shows you. So we use different approaches, and the goal is to make it affordable for the payer in low and middle income countries. So we usually work with academics, uh, local hospitals, governments in the country, and bring the technology from these two organizations. We are also talking to a good number of organizations in at least 3 different countries. I cannot reveal now. Who, we're trying also to get their technologies to be able to deploy it all around the world. The important thing is that, as I mentioned, the science has delivered. This is proven science. We have seen the outcomes. The gap is not in the science. The gap is in how this is commercialized. When value-based pricing points to a price tag of $4 million, which patients are you helping with that price tag?
Right.
So your methodology is not applicable in this case.
Right.
Your pricing methodology. So I know this goes against the way most of the biopharma industry actually works. But once again, I believe it has worked in biologics with small molecules, with bispecifics. Probably it works, but with cell and gene therapies, I think a price tag of from $500,000 to $4 million really is not helping patients. So we have to think differently, and particularly, and again, I don't, at this point in time, we're not working in high income markets. What I can tell you is in low and middle income markets, that conventional approach will not work. So low and middle income countries will not be able to afford $2, $3, $4 million per patient price tags. So then what do? I will give you an example, and it's sickle cell disease. There are 2 gene therapies available, approved in the US to treat sickle cell. Most of the patients, however, are in Africa and in India. So, but the therapy, both therapies, which are curatives, are still not available there. And so why do we have a gap where, the cure exists, but the patients are elsewhere? How do we close the gap? What I can tell you is that the conventional approach of value-based pricing and $3 million per patient will not work in Africa or India. So you have to find a different one. As simple as that. You have to find a different way. And I'm not working, I have to say, we're not working on sickle cell therapy, gene therapy yet, but we're working in other areas in cell and gene. And what is true is that the conventional model will not work in low and middle income countries. And so you have to find a different one. And so that's what we have found with CAR-T Global.
And so just for our listeners who are not familiar with value-based pricing, what is it exactly, and why does it rationalize a $4 million price tag per dose or for cell and gene therapies?
So before I talk about value-based price, I will mention what a cost plus pricing would be. So just to mark the difference between one and the other. Usually a supermarket will price their products according to cost plus. All right. They sell bananas and bread and all sort of commodities that, let me say, are in principle indistinguishable. A banana is a banana. I mean, might be better bananas here and there, but so the way you price it is according to the production cost and the distribution cost, and then you have a little margin, and then you compete on price. Okay, so that's if you want the cost plus pricing methods. Then you have the value-based pricing, which is a way where it's not, you price not according to the production or manufacturing cost, but the value to the user. All right. So that's a way you price, for instance, a bottle of wine. So it's a value that you assign to it. Okay. And again, I'm trying to be descriptive so that the audience understands what this means and what the difference is between one and the other. That's a way you price a a painting, a work of art. Okay, it's a value you assign to it. And in the case of pharmaceutical interventions, is the value to society, the value to the healthcare system, the value to the patient, the value to society. So the way they are priced is not according to the manufacturing or R&D costs that went into it. It's according to the value it provides. It provides a if a cure to the patients, a relief for the healthcare system, a lifetime relief for the patients. So that's highly valuable. And if you are even thinking this is only for a small number of patients because you're tackling a rare disease, a disease that is not common, but only a few. So you can then say, well, there's a high value attached to this, and there are methodologies to assign that value, and there are well proven methodologies to describe and assign quantitatively that value, which in principle is fine. But if the result of that is that patients will not have access because it's not affordable, then what do you do? So what happens if the value is so high that the corresponding price is so unaffordable, then your purpose is void. In the sense of you've created something very valuable, so valuable that society is not even able to use it. And patients are not able to access. So this is what we're going through right now in most of cell and gene therapy all around the world, even in the US. Only a fraction of patients who are eligible in the US actually receive, the cell or gene therapy for which they are eligible. So it's actually depending on which cell and gene, but it's a dismal fraction of patients who really have access. So something is not working then. Something is not working. And we really need to work on it. Because once again, what we want is the value of science to actually reach the patients and do it. I understand we have to do it in a sustainable way. We have to continue to provide the incentives for scientists and investors to continue developing therapies. But my point is that we are out of balance now. We have to come back to a balanced position. And that's even, as I mentioned, in high income markets, that's the situation in high income markets. Well, imagine in Africa, India, Southeast Asia, Latin America, North Africa, the value of the scientific progress should be available to all. And so that's what we're doing in CAR-T Global. We're trying to make sure that the scientific progress is available to every patient. You have no idea how the high bar for this goal is. There's so much to do. There's so much work that we still need to do, but we're on our way.
Definitely. Well, thank you for explaining it so well. It was very comprehensive of what the dilemma is currently and the current situation the industry is going through with cell and gene therapies. I see it's a lose-lose situation where neither the innovators are winning nor the patients in a way. And for both, it's a terrible place to be because the reward for innovating isn't as much because no one can buy it, and it is a life-saving therapy, but it doesn't really have any value because no one can afford it, like you said. And now switching gears into more the student side of things, you serve as a faculty advisor at USC. So what skills or mindsets do you encourage students and early career professionals to develop if they're interested in market access, health economics, or business development rather than lab science?
So I teach actually at the Masters of Healthcare Decision Analysis. And I've been doing it for a good number of years. And also I'm a faculty advisor. So I've seen a good number of students, and so I think curiosity is you always have to be trying to expand your horizons, trying to be curious and investigate new things. My advice would be, there's not a unique path. You cannot predict it either. I mean, given how innovation is going, things are moving, you cannot really predict your career for the next 40 years. But if you remain open and flexible and curious, I'm pretty sure you will succeed. So market access, again, it didn't exist as a function when I graduated. Now it's a key function within the biopharma industry. So my point is, I could not have predicted it because it didn't even exist. The point is that the opportunities will present if you're flexible and open and want to learn and want to be exposed as well. I think that's important. You want to be exposed. You want to, you also want to, I'm not going to say you want to fail, but you learn from that. You learn from mistakes when you expose yourself to new areas and to experiences. You have to continue learning. Learning doesn't stop when you graduate. You have to continue learning, reading, getting access to literature, scientific literature, or, in the case of, market access, as I mentioned, economics as well. I think that helps. And in my specific case, that I have I've been doing global positions for so long, and now with Carti Global, it is really a global job. I'm doing this from Bangkok, Thailand. I'm working here for a couple of months in Southeast Asia. There's also, you also need to understand the local culture, a bit of the political background. You have to understand somehow, what's behind, how the countries are structured, some of the geopolitical issues. If you're going to have a global position, you better know about those things. So that my advice again to students is be open, be flexible, continue learning, continue reading, expand your horizons, explore, be exposed, experiment. I tell this to my daughters. I have two daughters. They're at the beginning of their careers, and sometimes they get a little stressed about their careers. And I say, listen, you have about 40 years ahead of work life, probably even more, given the life expectancy, probably 50 years. And probably many in your audience are at that stage. They're around 25. Well, I tell you what, you have 50 years ahead of you, because you will probably be working at 75 with the advancements. And so it will come. as long as you continue learning, as long as you continue to be experimental, be flexible, and be exposed.
That's very valuable advice indeed. And so, moving along the same lines, what types of roles or skill sets do you see becoming critical in the next 5 to 10 years, particularly those uh, working in market access or the commercialization of advanced therapies?
Once again, I think, people would tell you AI.
Mhm.
And I'm not going to say that,
Okay.
by the way. I'm not, I'm not going to say that. I'm going to be different. I think there's still a lot of value that we as a human mind can do. I still believe that in the power of human relationships. I still believe that to be a market access professional, you have to have human skills. Remember that I mentioned scientific or economics knowledge, communication skills, and negotiation skills. Those are human skills. In this age where everybody is living a digital life, I would go back to the basics of human interaction, communication, social skills, because we've been losing them. I see it even in my students and in the younger generation. They're so comfortable with a digital life that your social skills suffer. So if there's one thing that I would advise is go out and enjoy life, talk to people, learn languages, use your brain, be more human. That's the way I would say that you would still need that in the next 10 years.
Yeah, that's very valuable advice, especially after the pandemic. I know it's people have gotten used to that digital life, working from home, um, the comfort of their home. And so, yes, it's very important to learn communication, especially be fluent in it. Because, again, like any other skill, it's a skill, and you have to do it regularly to keep yourself sharp enough. Once you stop it, you might lose that skill. So, I guess it's all about sharpening your sword and keeping it sharp for when you need to use it. Um, and so, along very similar lines, my last two questions to you. The first is speaking of all these skills and information and exploring your horizons, what is your favorite source of healthcare industry insight?
So, I'm addicted, let me put it this way, to a newsletter by my good friend Jason Schafrin. I read it on LinkedIn. It's called Healthcare Economist. I strongly recommend it. It's a source of global insights, literature, um, and analysis. So usually he reports, let me put it that way, on papers, new publications with some analysis commentary on his side. So, once again, healthcare economist. I really like it. And the other one, it's a publication that I still believe it's been around since 1843. You probably know it, The Economist.
Oh, of course.
I still believe it's the best thing around. You get a really broad view of politics, current affairs, science, business globally. And it's a so I read it, I would say, every day.
That's definitely very useful piece of information. And so my final question to you now is there a quote or a principle that has guided you in your career?
Absolutely. And I would say it's honesty. It's the same honesty that you have when you negotiate. You negotiate in good faith, you know? Going back to that winner takes it all, that mindset probably I'm not saying that it's not honest. I'm only saying that if you're doing it in good faith, you're trying to bring the good to both sides. So again, it's honesty. You have to be honest also to yourself. What you like, what you don't like, what you believe in, what you, I think that's probably that internal exercise on, be honest to yourself, um is so important. And it has also to come naturally. It's not that you're honest on Monday to Friday, and not very much so Saturdays and Sundays. It's daily. It's your life. You really have to be honest. You with yourself, with your relationships, with the people around you at work, with your working partners, with the payers, when you talk to the payers, if you're in the market access function, with whoever you are, you have to conduct yourself honestly,
Perfect.
with honesty. And so that's probably my guiding principle.
Okay. Yeah, very well said. Like the saying goes, honesty is the best policy. That brings us to the end of our episode. Thank you so much, Dr. Garnica, for joining us, especially from Thailand. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today, and hopefully, our listeners got some very valuable information out of this.
It's bigger than biotech.